Why can't everything just happen in one magical take?
I'm trying to write this article right now. Um, and this is what's on my mind right now. And I was just running it by some people, and this is the thought here. Um, I was watching a podcast by Lex Friedman, who I think you know, right, Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Lex
he's awesome.
Friedman. Yeah, he's like the more scientific version of Joe Rogan, but less podcast personality,
Also,
and it all balances itself out.
this is a really quick tangent. Have you ever watched the one with his dad?
I've not.
Yeah. The one Lex Friedman, he interviews his dad, and it's one of the coolest interviews I've ever heard. His dad's fascinating, old Russian from and just
Yeah.
this incredibly brilliant scientist, but just has such a wealth of wisdom. Anyways, continue.
So, anyways, about a couple of days ago, he interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, and Zuckerberg said in the interview, he was talking about the metaverse and all the possibilities and what's happening with the metaverse, and he said, um, "We're trying to create and maintain the illusion that we are in and present to our world." Which is one of the most screwed up things I've ever heard somebody say. And he says it with a smile on his face, and he says it like this is a good thing. But he's saying we're trying to create and maintain the illusion that we are in our world and present to our world,
Yeah, which is absolute
which is
insanity.
absolute insanity, right? And you start to think about, and this is kind of that really triggered some things, as you might think. And this is kind of what I've been kind of spewing to everyone tonight as I'm trying to sort through these thoughts is we're thinking about all these things that are happening in the world today, whether it's with Ukraine and Canada and United States, and all these different places, and and all of our information is being gotten from social media sources, whether it's Facebook and Instagram or Twitter or whatever. It's different and social media sources, and it's all of it gotten on the internet, you know. Um, you know, and the thing I'm most concerned about though, with all of this is the attack that it has on our free will. That's actually what I'm most concerned about. Um, because you start to put somebody in a metaverse, and the most important the thing about a metaverse is that the way we experience things and the way we come to know things and the way that we judge things is all through our senses, right? And so what we do is they've given us this little phone and these little things that work on the phone that we call apps, and they basically become the phone becomes our brain, and the apps become the little compartments of our brain, and we're told to, if you want to think about this, you go onto Facebook. If you want to think about this, you go onto Instagram. If you want to think about Facebook, it's like world issues, and Instagram has become like more artistic things, and work is like LinkedIn or whatever. I don't know. For everyone, it's a little bit different. There's lots of apps, but you have this little brain that you have, and then you plug into it, right? And then you're told what to think, and all of a sudden that's an attack on your free will, and they're trying to control what you think, and it's and who's they, you can get into all kinds of things. That's all conspiracy theory. I'm not trying to be conspiracy theory. The point is that you're not thinking for yourself.
And it's
but
not
but
actually reality. Like, you're not actually coming to terms with the real world. And Elon Musk went on this about, maybe it's almost 2 years ago now, on the Rogan podcast. And when he first brought up the whole idea of the no, man, I'm not gonna remember the name of it, Cyberlink, I think is what it is, right? Where you plug
yeah,
the chip into the back of your brain.
yeah,
And Rogan was kind of taken aback, because I mean, who wants to be living, wants a computer brain? And Musk brought up the point of, well, we already have it. Like, we're already interfacing with a computer all the time. Like, we already use our phones as sort of like second brains. So anyways, continue.
absolutely, yeah. And the problem is that they found is this, that you can't control a person that way, because a person has fingers and they have ears and they have a nose and they have a mouth and they have all these things that and brain and rationality. They can think for themselves, right? And so what happens is the person maintains their free will and their ability to be rational. All right, well, what's the next step to then? Well, Mark Zuckerberg is, sitting in the same podcast I was listening to, talking about what are they called, these suits?
Oh, the haptic suits.
The haptic suits, yeah. These haptic suits where basically, you can wear this haptic suit and put your hand down and feel the illusion of a table there. The table's not there, but you can feel it.
Yeah.
And that's something Lex Friedman asked him about. He said, when we're having a conversation in person, when I'm sitting right next to you, there's certain things that we can do that you can't do on Zoom or you can't do on the internet right now. I can't see the minute, movements that you make. I can't lean over and whisper something to you in a conversation. All of a sudden, like your 3D movements that you make, they don't mean as much to me. And Lex Friedman asked Mark Zuckerberg, he's like, how long until those things are available in this alternative universe? And he said something along the lines of 5 years at least, and then those things will be available. And that's all with the haptic suits, and things like that. And so what's happening is once that's available and once your senses are, this first thing with your phones, control your brain. Well, that's not enough. Now control your senses. And all of a sudden, it's a threat to your free will. Because if you are unable to sense things and then make rational decisions based on that, then your free will is
severely compromised. I mean, that's a
severely
massive,
compromised. Yeah.
if not, well, no, severely compromised. I mean, everybody will still retain some amount of free will. I mean, this is a question that, and here's it's an odd moral question, but if you are feeling everything, if every sense that you have is activated while you're playing a game and you're playing a shooter game and you're killing people in that game, I mean, how culpable do you end up being, right, for being an assassin? And it's a weird thought, but it's like if all of your senses are believing that what you are experiencing is real. And that's the hard part about it, is that you can say, well, okay, but I didn't actually kill anybody in the game. Yeah, but our sense knowledge is our knowledge. All knowledge comes through the senses, all of
Yeah.
it. It's not like 50% comes through the senses and then the other 50% we've just sort of gathered from some, a fear, faraway source in our minds or in our hearts. Like, no. All of our knowledge started in the senses. Yeah, there's now we have conceptions in our
Yeah.
mind or movements of our heart, but all of the movements of our heart and the conceptions of our mind began in our senses. So if all of your senses are tricked into believing that something is real when it's not real, you can't actually say, well, that's not a real person, because all of your senses believe it's a real person. There's no
Yeah.
ability
The
to
interesting thing
distinguish.
and the thing that people will say about, video games and the defense, that people will give for first person shooter video games is that, your senses aren't totally tricked. Right now they're not,
Which is
you know,
true.
which is
They're
true.
not
Your
completely.
senses are not totally tricked. Now, it is interesting to think though that, when those video games came out, or say the first time you played a video game personally and an experienced video game like that, your senses were more tricked than they were later on when you're used to it, right? We're a evolutionary species.
I don't know about that, actually. I might actually say that the further in you get, the more your senses are tricked. Although it's more, because it's more normal. I mean, it's much more of
Well,
a
yeah,
wonderful experience at the beginning, right? You experience this sense of wonder at being able to play Major League Baseball in a Major League Baseball game, or be playing in the NFL. But then eventually that
yeah,
wears off and it becomes somewhat normal. But I mean, look at the amount of people who create. I mean, I think creating Madden leagues or creating, Call of Duty leagues and all these different things are a testament to the fact that actually further in you go, the more you play these things, I think the more your senses do believe that it's real, and you begin to kind of identify more with the game, or you put part of your personality or part of your personhood or your soul into
yeah.
these games. So
Well,
I don't
maybe
know.
that's where you distinguish between um your senses there. Maybe your senses maybe believe that it's more real, but your rationality at first is think your rationality being more aligned with your senses at first when you experience it, and you had that wonderful sensation of for the first time you play this game, and you're and then your rationality is tricked into thinking, even just for a split second, like this is real, and then your rationality kind of triggers in with everything and your senses, and you realize this is not real. Your senses then become more in your senses then become more tricked, and your rationality becomes less tricked. Your rationality thinks this is your rationality is able to distinguish that this is not real, but
Yeah.
your senses,
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I mean yeah, I think there's something to that.
It's all theory. I
It is
don't.
a really strange. No, it's a very strange future that some of these people are trying to achieve. Because did you watch the first Facebook Meta advertisement? I think it was the first.
I actually did not know.
It was around Christmas time that it played. I believe it was during like bowl games. Is when I saw it. But the advertisement was of two people, and they're living their lives, and one of them and it goes back and forth between these two people who are like best friends within the metaverse, and they're playing with one another, and then it'll kind of come out of the metaverse, and you'll see this guy, and he'll get on an elevator, and he'll go down the elevator, and then he'll ride back up the elevator, and he just looks depressed, or he's in work and he looks depressed, and it's raining outside and he's depressed, and and I mean the whole time he just looks depressed. And I believe at the time he also has like a wife and children. I don't quote me on this, but no, he's completely alone, which is worse. and then across the hallway from him, I think the other guy has wife and child. Anyways, so this commercial goes on, and you see these two people, and they're going about their daily lives, and they're one sitting at their office and they're depressed, and the other person's going up, and at a certain point though they get on an elevator together, and they go up and down. They don't talk to one another, and then they go into their rooms, and they live in apartments like next to each other. And at one point, like they're doing something crazy in the metaverse, and one guy makes a big loud noise, and the other guy goes over to the wall and says, like, shut up, like what, like bangs on the wall. It's like, shut up, stop making noise. And then he puts on his goggles again, and they're best friends in the metaverse. And that's the commercial. And I was like, that is the most twisted, that is the worst advertisement for something like this. I mean, maybe people at this time are so inundated that they don't perceive how just utterly evil that is. But to me, that was almost shockingly evil. To talk,
Oh yeah.
to look at a life and to say, here's this life, it's so depressed, but when you get into, like, you don't know your neighbor, you're completely alone, but it's like, well, why are you completely alone? Why don't you know your neighbor? Why are you depressed? Well, I mean, have you ever thought it's because you've been putting goggles on your face, and you've been going to a different reality? You've never walked outside and felt the rain and felt the wonder of the raindrops on your skin, or felt the wind blowing, even if it's a cold wind, to feel the cold wind blowing through your hair, to feel your beard freeze, to hear somebody, like, you've never experienced those things. Like, those things don't make you alive. Maybe it's because you've been putting goggles on your face. And what the crazy thing though is that that's what Facebook, or now Meta, or Mark Zuckerberg is promoting, is talking about, as though that's a good end of humanity. Like, that's somehow fulfilling. And it's like, that is
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's shocking, and it's something we were talking the other day. You just finished, I think, reading the symposium.
No, I still have the third part where
You're almost done with it.
I'm so close. I mean, it's Alcibiades is going on, and ripping. Yeah. Anyway,
so you're almost done with the symposium, and I believe you were saying that in one part of the symposium, I think you were saying Socrates, if I remember correctly, is talking about the thing that tyrants fear the most.
No, that's at the beginning, I believe.
Oh, that's at the beginning.
The two people who are walking.
Okay.
I believe that's, or it's the first person to talk, not Agathon, but oh darn it, their names Greeks.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I can't remember.
The first person that talks, he talks about the two distinguishes between the two loves, and he talks in praise of love, and he says that love is the thing that tyrants fear the most, because the bond, like any army would wish and hopes that if an army was to be created out of friends, out of people who were in love, out of beloved and lovers, or lovers and the beloved, if an army was created out of it, they would be an unstoppable army, because they would never give up. They would always sacrifice themselves for the beloved, or for their lover, and they would never ever give up. They would never flee. They would never, their courage would never fail. Because what lover wouldn't go to the end for their beloved, and I think that was, or what beloved wouldn't go to the end for their lover. So anyways, and so he talks about
I mean, and it's interesting then, I've been thinking about that a lot, like the thing that a tyrant or the enemy, or what they fear the most, is friendship and love. And a couple things have been going through my mind with that. One is the story I saw about the situation in Ukraine, which, who knows if it's true at this point, but it's a story I saw. And it was of this young couple who got married. And they were supposed to get married later on, but they got married real quickly just because they didn't know what would happen. And then they spent the first couple hours of their married life, arming up with guns and getting ready to defend Ukraine. At this point, who knows if the story is true or not? It's a great story, though, right? And you can imagine that type of story giving the people around them hope. And I was thinking, why does that story give people around them hope? It's not like two young kids who just got married with a couple of AK-47s are going to be taking down Russia. Why does that give you hope? Well, because we all know, and people know innately, like when they see it, that this, it's like when you're a kid and you see a spider and your parents tell you it's more afraid of you than you are of it, right? That's exactly what a tyrant is like when it sees friendship and love, right? It's more afraid of you than you are of it.
Yeah, which I think is telling in today's world. And we were talking about who's the whole conspiracy theory, and I don't think there's much of a conspiracy theory. If there's a conspiracy theory, it's pretty out in the open at this point.
It's unimportant who they is.
It is in many ways it's unimportant, because it's the same game that's always been played, right? It's the same thing over and over again throughout history. It's just that now they have these technological tools to be able to get into your own home, to be able to speak to you directly, essentially, right? But it's the same old game. And I think you're exactly right. What do people who want power fear the most? People who just, because friends, and this is the other, I love when C.S. Lewis's chapter on friendship in the Four Loves, where he talks about the love of friendship, and he talks about how it is in one sense a love which excludes. It doesn't want any outside interference, right? Like when you find a friend, you've in a sense fallen in love over something, right? You've said, oh, you too have a love for something, and then this friendship blossoms, and you find that soul recognizes soul, or all the different language that is used for it. But in that, you don't want outside interference. You don't want to allow sort of the outside world to push into the friendship, to sort of pollute it. And so with any sort of actual tyrannical structure, or oligarchical structure, or even democratic structure in some way, the bad form of democracy, just which is actually called democracy. Like with any one of those sort of bad social or political orders, friendship exists outside of that. People who are friends, who are, as the Greeks say, who are lovers, like they don't participate in that, because they're caught up in their love. There's the lover, the beloved, and their love, but it's their love, like the third in each. And I think it's Aristophanes who goes on about how at one time it was not man and woman. They were united, and there were three parts. There was three parts to humanity. There was the lover, the beloved, and their love, and then they were split apart by the gods as punishment. But I think what's beautiful about that is that when you have and their love, well, that exists outside of anything anybody can touch. And so all of a sudden you have a small social structure which exists outside of the the tyrannical structure. But then this is the beautiful thing, is that then C.S. Lewis talks about, though it's a love that excludes, it's always a love that's looking to add another to their company. Like, you don't just want to be friends with one person. Like, you create a friendship. And I think the Inklings and the Lewis and the Tolkien and the writers of the Inklings are a great testament to this. Like, I'm sure it only started with two of them sitting around and talking about their art or talking about their writings and stuff, but they were searching for a third, and then they searched, and then the three searched for a fourth, and then the then they searched for a fifth and a sixth, right? So they're constantly searching for another to add. They're very picky, right? Friendship is going to be exclusive, in the sense that if somebody comes along and they don't share in that common love, well, then they're not in the group, and like, we all recognize this
Yeah.
when we're in middle school, but we call them cliques, because at that point they're incredibly superficial, and they're superficial. But
Yeah.
when you have something that's deep, when you have virtue that is loved by two, and two people pursue virtue, or pursue the good life, pursue the good, or pursue something beautiful, or pursue the truth together, well, then all of a sudden you have a true bond of friendship. And that friendship exists outside of any sort of tyrannical structure, but it's always looking to add a third or a fourth or a fifth to it. And I think that's one of the pieces where slowly that grab for power becomes eroded by friendship itself. And I think in that way, love ends up overcoming it. And like you said, tyrants are more afraid of that than they're afraid of anything else, because they know that it will erode it, because they know that the people who are in love with one another, who have a love outside of just the dreary everyday, just go to work, get your things done, go back home, be alone, but do your things, be productive, be a productive member of society, get your stuff done, and then go home and enjoy our metaverse and be entertained and be pleasured by, the pleasures of this world, and by, and by the bodily pleasures, which are the basest of all pleasures and basest of all goods. And so, of all loves. And so they know that true friendship will erode all of that, will destroy all of that. And there's nothing, here's the other, the hopeful thing is that there's nothing they can do about it. Like, if it happens, it happens. Like, in many ways, that's where we can say free will is not compromised. Like, we're in control of that. We can choose to go outside, to turn off our phones,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, and here's where so that's true. There's a lot that came to my mind with what you were saying.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say this. I'll just address where you're at, right? Yeah, we still have that free will to go turn off the phone. But how long till we don't have that free will? Right? And that's kind of it's kind of funny when you think about it this way. It's kind of, funny, but it's kind of the conversation I was having tonight with some people. As I was questioning, how long till we don't have that free will? What does that mean? And once you do that, you kind of step into a hypothetical realm. And that's never the healthiest place to be. But you need to be, I think, aware of it to an extent. And this is kind of, and it was kind of funny, it's obviously a little bit humorous when you talk about this, but what does that look like when you can't put down the phone? Well, kind of, one possibility is it looks like something like that Wall-E movie, right?
Yeah. It's
You have a bunch of people living in a metaverse, and their whole life is in a metaverse.
Yeah.
And they literally do not move. Their whole entire life is in a metaverse, which is not that far-fetched of a thing. Why? Because
we
have feeding tubes. We can have feeding tubes, right? We can do everything we want in the metaverse. As far as reproduction goes, we have artificial insemination, right? We can do any of that, right? We could do it all, right? We could do this all. Not a problem. The problem becomes then when someone reclaims their free will and their identity, and they say, put down the phone, take off the mask, right? And then they get up to move. And like, imagine one of those people from
They
the
can't
Wall-E
move.
movie getting up to move. He can't move. he'll die in 5 steps because he's obese, right?
Yeah.
So my point in saying that is that there's a dependency you create on that type of life. So what you have to do, you have to put down the phone before you get in that state,
But
right?
but I'm not sure that the human
And
spirit would ever let it get that bad. And this is
you
I
say that.
suppose. And well, no,
I hope you're right, but
well, I hope I'm right too. But honestly, hope would tell us, and I think hope would say that no, the human spirit would never. Now, many might succumb to something like that, and I think today many do succumb to things like that. I mean, you do have a mass amount of obesity within the United States, and I think some people will just struggle with it, but I think it's a real struggle because our world does in some ways make that a real fight. There's some people that don't want to be obese probably and are really struggling with obesity because like around them there are all these things that are helping them become obese, that are encouraging them to, well, don't don't get off the computer and go outside, don't go join a martial arts gym and learn how to use your body in a beautiful way. Don't do any of that stuff. Just stay inside. Just play another game. Just oh man, you just died in this
it's so
game. Like
interesting too. No,
just
it's so
start
interesting
another
too
one.
because
Yeah.
I remember when the Wii came out
Oh
and we
yeah.
were
Then it was
all
all about the whole.
so
Yeah.
excited because up to then,
It was like now you can
well, I mean,
exercise in video
I
games.
grew up on Nintendo 64. We never had like um the the
PlayStation 2
GameCube or
or the
PlayStations or
yeah.
whatever. We never had that. I had Nintendo 64. So you had a controller with a wire hooked up to the box. You would play Pac-Man and you would play Mario Kart and Madden 64, which, was horrible.
Which is yeah.
And all this stuff. And then occasionally you would go over to friends' houses and they would have like a GameCube, I think it was called, and PlayStation and things like that. And then Wii comes out, and Wii was huge because all of a sudden, we envisioned this thing like they told what they said was like your movements are the game, and so it was almost advertised as if it was like healthy,
Yeah.
as if it was
Oh
like
my
healthier.
gosh. It was definitely advertised as though it was healthy. In fact, PlayStation and Xbox jumped on that train, and the amount of exercise games and dance games and all these things that came out with all these
It
platforms
was
that were
like,
all like these
don't go play
movement things.
tennis,
You just go play
just
Wii
play
tennis.
Wii tennis. And like you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then you go play Wii tennis, and you realize you're just like flailing your arm around like an idiot, right?
Here's the
But
crazy thing though is what kind of I was thinking about this the other day because tennis is incredibly hard, right? I mean,
oh, it's
Tanner showed up one time.
it's so
Like
hard.
Tanner loves going and playing tennis. So everyone, when he's home, every once in a while he'll be like, "Yo, let's go play tennis." So we'll go up there and play tennis. And I'm always amazed at how difficult it is. Like tennis is just
It's
one of those.
so
I never
difficult.
played tennis growing up, and it's just one of those sports that I just never play, and I still don't really play it. So it's like I've played it probably 10, 15 times in my life, and so every time I play it, I'm reminded of, holy cow, it takes a lot of skill to play this game. But the satisfaction you get, that even going from like complete noob but being able to not hit the ball whatsoever over the net, absolutely whiffing on things, just not getting any stroke right, like to being able to play a very basic game with your friend is 1,000 times more satisfying and fulfilling
And
than
now
every game
imagine that
being an
satisfaction
expert
when
on
you
Wii.
yeah, exactly. You imagine going to a court and you suck because it's your second time playing tennis. And like we said, tennis is hard. So you suck.
Yeah.
And then you're like, screw this.
I'm just gonna
And then
play
you
Wii
go,
tennis.
and then your parents buy you a Wii, and you go and you play tennis on the Wii, and all of a sudden you're Serena Williams,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
But
the satisfaction is through the roof. And
well,
so I mean, but and the skill is, there's no skill involved.
but
You
I don't know if
know?
the satisfaction is through the roof, and that's where I think hope comes in here, because I do think
Yeah. Okay.
that over the years I've played less and less video games because of that very fact, which is like I got really good at some video games. You know, you get really good at a video game, but then you just realize that like I'm not actually good at anything. Like I'm not really good at anything. Like, yeah, I'm good at clicking some buttons and moving a little joystick, but like that's not something. And in some ways it's just nothing. I mean, it's nothing fulfilling to the human spirit. It's nothing fulfilling to the human body, the mind. I mean, yeah, maybe the mind's engaged a little bit, but I
Yeah.
feel as though the satisfaction that you get at being able to play a mediocre game of tennis or a very poor game of tennis with your friend is 1,000 times greater than being Serena Williams in Wii tennis. And
Yeah.
now, and this is going back to
No,
the earlier
let's not.
discussion. Now let's not.
Yeah.
Now here's the part where Mark Zuckerberg is kind of pushing towards, which is the part that is legitimately worrisome. And I think I told you that when I went to I was so curious about the VR, so I just popped on I went to the VR arcade and popped on the headset with like the ear things and everything like that. And even just having the head, even just the two senses, the sight and the hearing, those two things, those two senses were enough to throw me into something where it felt quite real. Quite real. And 15 minutes felt like hours. I think or maybe it was 25 minutes or something like that. I mean, it felt like a good hour or two. And that kind of trickery of the senses is dangerous in the fact that I walked outside and it took me a couple hours to come back to reality. It had been raining when I walked in, and I had had a really nice afternoon actually, and I just remember really loving the warm rain, and it was in South Carolina, and there was this warm rain, and I'd just been on the beach, and it was beautiful. And then after I came out of the VR arcade, it was still raining, and I was feeling the rain, and I was trying to come back to reality, like come on, get there. And it's the same sort of sense that you have when you're on your phone for a while and you kind of just end up going down just a rabbit hole of, let's say,
Oh
YouTube.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden you kind of get off of it, and there's just this sort of this emptiness inside. And you try to go outside and you try to look at the sunset. Normally sunsets move you, but this time you're looking at it, just nothing's happening. And you're almost like, oh gosh, like what the heck? And there's a temptation in the moment to just go back to your phone, right? And the only way that you can actually get to the sunset is by pushing through that and waiting and overcoming the temptation to go do something. And look, it's a temptation. I fall to it all the time.
The thing,
I constantly. But I think
the thing,
the VR stuff is incredibly dangerous because it is now 100 times more trickery.
Yeah, the thing I keep
so-
hearing in all this too, like, which I just think is fascinating, is the perception of time with all of this. Like you said, you're in there for 25 minutes and it feels like hours, right? And you mentioned like we're on our phones, right, all the
Yeah,
time, and like all of a sudden time goes by, right, and it feels like not that much time. Or say you watch a movie, and how easily can you be tricked while you're watching a movie that, like, oh my gosh, I went through that whole life with that person or whatever, and it's like your sense of time is so easily skewed by one or two senses.
Yeah.
So easily skewed by one or two senses, right? And all of a sudden, all of a sudden your sense of time is so skewed by these two senses. What does that say? And now you make it even, more real with a metaverse where it's not only one or two senses, but we're engaging all of the senses then, presumably. What happens to our idea and our perception of our own mortality then? If our mortality is based on time,
Yeah.
right? Do we all of a sudden lose sense of our mortality? Right, and I think we do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, I guess I just don't know. But it's a question.
That's that is an interesting line of inquiry, because there's a part of our modern world, right? Like memento mori, right? Remember your death. Remember your death. And there's something haunting, having a skull on your desk and looking at that skull and remembering that, from dust did I come, to dust shall I return. Oh, nice. Hello, Mr. Skull. Hello, death.
Always keep one on my desk.
Yeah, I actually really got to get a skull. I guess I can't walk in a Chick-fil-A with a skull. Someone just walks in. I'm just like, oh, I just carry this with me, just
quick story here.
normally.
Quick story here.
Yeah.
I wanted to get a skull for my desk because it's
Yeah.
there's a huge tradition of
Yeah.
having a skull on your desk to remember that everything you do,
You're gonna
this is
die.
how you'll end up.
Yeah.
I wanted to get one, so I go on Amazon or whatever, and I'm like, I want to get a skull. And I actually Googled real human skull because I kept finding these things. I was like, all right, this is fake. This is fake. And I was like, no, I want the real deal. And then it hit me as I was typing in. I was like, why would they have that? I was like, why would they have that? And why would I want that? Like,
well, I don't blame you for really wanting it. I mean, what do you think? What do you think all the people, what do you think all the saints who actually had like skulls in their desk had? This wasn't a fake skull. They had real skulls. I mean, you go to the skull chapels, like they had real skulls. I mean, but
yeah, absolutely.
Amazon.
But it was just funny. I like typed it into Amazon, and then I just had a moment of remembering, like, I'm on Amazon, not in some graveyard or some skull church in Italy.
That's where we should go. You go to Italy and just like, can I have one? Like, can I have one? Can I just take?
They're
one
like, no, that's an integral part to the chandelier.
yeah. You're like, oh gosh, yeah. Like, here's all the femur. Here's the femur chandelier. You're like, oh, that's pretty cool, I guess. I don't know what to make.
You're saying about memento mori, though.
No, I think the whole memento mori in our modern age, like, people are terrified to think of death now. People don't want to remember their own death, and it's one of the most uncomfortable things for a modern man to think about. And in many ways, people like don't even think, like, they just literally don't think about it. They just pretend like they're not going to die someday, or like somehow they're going to avoid death. And the way that people react to death is so odd to me, because death touches us all. Like, death comes for us all. Death comes for every single member of our family. There's no point in trying to avoid it and think. And I think also, and look, people dying, there's something painful of the passage of somebody from this life into the next, and from their soul leaving their bodies. Like, there's something painful in that. There's something painful not being able to physically touch and physically be with somebody whom you love. That's incredibly painful. Of course it is.
Yeah.
There's no denying that part of it. But on the flip side, in a way, I think the reaction to death is so, it's almost without hope today. Like, there's this, and people, when they get cancer, are just terrified, and everybody, it's this horrible thing. And again, cancer's bad. This is not saying that these things aren't bad. I guess what I'm saying is that we should look at our reactions to these things and think about, is it in right proportion? Because there are times when, and then on the flip side, and I think this is the danger of all this, which is that we've gone to these two extremes, where you have this one extreme where it's like the person's suffering, so like, let them die. Which is like, well, okay, I mean, like, not that much dignity, I guess, in suffering, which, like, there is an incredible amount of dignity in suffering. So that's one extreme. And so we're just like, well, just like, let them take some pills and pass away quietly in their sleep. And you're like, like, it's a huge denial of that human life has dignity even in suffering, that it's beautiful even when in immense suffering, and that you can have, that you can grow to closer to man's final end and something that is good for man through suffering.
Yeah, with that line of argument, you would just get to,
like,
stub my toe, just pull the plug.
But yes, you can eventually get there. But I think on the other side, though, we have this sort of other side, which, and I think it comes from the same place, like, nobody should suffer, and so suffering is so terrible. But then at the same time, when somebody dies, there's this massive reaction, and I think you saw this with COVID, where it's like, where someone who is 95 years old, who has 4 different comorbidities, is quite sick, and then they die, and people are acting like somehow this is was avoidable. Like it was somehow
Yeah.
this thing
Well,
to
Can
run
you?
away from. Sorry,
Yeah.
and I
Okay.
gotta
This
be
is really interesting.
careful here.
So this is really interesting because you're saying some people are acting. What did you just say that um people are acting like this is avoidable and like and they don't want to suffer or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it was you said, but that's exactly what. So harkening back to the metaverse thing, why metaverse? Why metaverse? So that you can mitigate and control suffering.
yeah,
So you can mitigate and control that, right? And it makes me think of the Republic, Plato's Republic, right? Given the chance, without any consequences, man will always choose to do the thing that is not just, is one of the arguments made in the Republic, right? Okay,
wait. Given the chances, man will always choose to do
man
that
will
which is
choose to
not
do,
just.
yeah, man will choose to do the thing which is most pleasurable, and you know, with no regard for justice,
Okay,
if there's no consequences.
if there's no consequences.
If there's no consequences, and the consequences, um, being, and the consequences are part of, and these negative consequences, that we experience, they're the fruit of our our poor decision making, right? This is not beneficial for me, but I chose it anyways, because I make poor decisions sometimes, right? And all of a sudden we have a consequence then,
Yeah,
right? And and that is because of the fact that man has faults and man can have faults and man sins. So essentially, what the metaverse is trying to do is get rid of the effects. Trying to become its own savior. It's trying to become It's trying to get rid of original sin. There's no effects to your actions. There's no consequence to your actions, right?
yeah.
There is no death. There's no suffering, right? There is just the metaverse. And everything is fine and dandy in the metaverse, right?
But how does this play though back into what I was saying about the memento mori and so sort of the people sort of trying to trying to avoid death, but I think number two, like the reactions to death in this world. I mean the either the reaction of, well, let's just let somebody pass away and, they're suffering, give them some pills, versus like, hey, this person was literally on their deathbed and just died, and so now our family just fell apart and is now completely, you know, is and people are people are
Because we
losing.
literally have no idea how to react to suffering. If because we try to do it on our own. We try to do it of our own devices. Like we have no idea how to react to suffering. So there's two responses to it. Either freak the hell out, right? When it happens and someone dies and we don't like that and someone's gone, then you either freak the hell out or you do everything you can to make it not happen again. So that's where you have those two
Yeah.
sides of the argument, right?
Or you become
either
cold, or you become incredibly cold. Like you turn your heart, and maybe that's trying to keep it from happening again. Maybe that's part of trying to keep it from
It's
happening
probably
again.
part of it, yeah.
Be, and I think that there's that like healthy balance, right? Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted, right? There's
Yeah.
this aspect of mourning. I mean, that you need to allow the things that hurt, the things that wound your
Yeah.
heart, to actually wound your heart, to mourn those things. And I think the death of a loved one will naturally make your heart, break, and you naturally will weep. But also mourn, I think, with hope, right? Mourn with the idea that you shall be comforted, and take comfort in that very
Yeah.
thought that, hey, allowing this mourning, and also I think too, and this is, I guess, what I'm trying to say is that, like, allow there to be comfort, allow there to be hope. Like, don't man, there's so many problems. Our world has so many problems. Like there was a priest the other day who gave a homily. He said, the worst thing about this world right now is that like mortal sin has become normalized, and yet we talk about, as though everybody will go to heaven, and yet the path that has been laid forth for people is the path that leads to hell. Like it's mortal sin is completely normal. I mean, it's not even like people like you say that something is a mortal sin, and people don't even have a concept of sin. One, number two, people don't even, definitely don't have a concept of mortal sin, where somehow your soul will die because of sin. And then number three, to say something like that is thought to be like the most crazy, extreme, hateful, bigoted thing that you could say. But it's like, well, no, it's one of the most loving things you can say. Like, if there really is something after death, I mean, I want my loved ones, I want people whom I love to be, you know, and, you know, I want their souls to live on. I want their souls to be eternally happy, and I want their souls to be eternally in possession of the good. Oh my gosh, the when Socrates, this goes all the way back to the Symposium, little tangent, and then we'll pull it back. But the in the Symposium, Socrates says that the nature of love is the eternal possession of the good. I thought that was beautiful, that the soul does not want to possess the good just for a time, but the soul desires to possess, it's the eternal possession of the good. Either that's Aristophanes or it's Socrates. I think it might be Socrates, or it might be Agathon. But one of them talks about that, like that's the nature of love. And I thought that was incredibly beautiful. That's the eternal possession of the good. I mean, is that not what we desire? And also then Socrates goes on to say how like love is somehow everything but also nothing. I mean, he just pretty much just makes you all confused. No, but no,
Yeah.
but I thought what was beautiful about what Socrates goes on about is that you both possess love in a way, but also don't possess it. Like, if you were to possess it fully, then you would never want it, and so you would leave it to the side, almost like a child's toy, and you would just leave it after they get tired of it. You would just leave it and go to something else. But no, like true love is something that you never fully possess. Like, it's always something that you do possess, but you don't possess fully. And so you're constantly desiring to have that which you do not have. And in that is the love. So it's the love is the desire for the eternal possession of the good. And I think that's what everybody wants their loved ones to have, the eternal possession of the good. But, and this is what's so scary about, I think, our modern world, if you do not possess it now, if you are not pursuing and desiring the possession of goods, true goods, eternal goods, everlasting goods, if you are not pursuing those things, making that your life's aim, centering your life around the possession of those everlasting goods, well, then you will not live, like your soul will pass on and it will be in that state forever. It will not be pursuing those eternal goods, and by not pursuing them, and it will be sort of finalized. Like in this world, we sort of live in an in between, in some sense. We're never fully one way or fully another way. We're kind of these creatures sort of caught in the middle between pursuing what is good and also leaving off what is good, and like you said, like what Plato talks about in the Republic, like choosing injustice rather than justice, or these other things, because we forget the consequences, or we try to mitigate the consequences to those actions, or we try to avoid them or make excuses for them. And so we're constantly caught in between this ebb and this flow. And I think, but when we die, when we pass on, like that ebb or that flow, it ends. The ebb or the flow is done. It's one way or it's the other way. And that's the thing. Like, and so if we are making our life's goal the pursuit of these eternal and everlasting goods, then in eternity we will possess and be pursuing good and truth and beauty for eternity, and it will be beautiful. And if we sort of, and this is where the whole metaverse thing kind of comes in, if we, are sucked into our phones, go out and see the sunset, and just never make the effort to actually sit in silence for long enough to actually get back to the sunset. If we just always are choosing that other route, which again, I am guilty of choosing all the time, and it's a huge struggle. It's a massive battle. But if we give up on that battle, if we give up that fight and just like lay down and be like, well, I'll just take the haptic suit and I'll let it, I'll take the bodily pleasure, and I don't need the sunsets, I don't need the virtue, I don't need the sun, the sunshine or the rain or these eternal goods, these virtues, this beauty. I don't need true beauty, objective beauty. I don't need any of that stuff. I don't need to pursue the truth. Well, then Yeah, I mean it's
Well,
it's it's a
then this, because I think what happens then, we live in a world where suffering and where these things that we view as evil because they don't feel good or seem good or whatever, they're actually quite integral to the way we understand the world, and for us to be completely within the world and be good in the world, right? Without the experience of having stubbed your toe or gotten, cold and sick to the bone because of the rain or something like that, you would never know. You'd never have an experience to contrast the beauty of a sunset beach with great weather with, right? Or you know,
or
stub
just
your toe.
or just the comfort of your mother. Like when you
Yeah,
stub your
exactly.
toe, you stub your toe or I mean, my wrist.
It's
Like
like the Incredibles say, if everything is super, if
nothing is
everybody's
super.
super,
Yeah,
nobody's super,
yeah,
right? If every experience is good, no experience is good,
yeah.
right? And that's the way we exist in our world right now.
Because it's the whole
Um,
Socrates sort of thing, like where love is something, but is it something or is it nothing? Like, do you possess it or do you not possess it? Can you ever actually possess it, or can you know what I mean? Like, there's
yeah.
this, yeah,
Yeah, and so I think it's so vital for us to not go into some kind of alternative universe, and
don't put
to
on the goggles.
continue experience. Yeah, don't put on the goggles, don't put on the suit, right? And to continue experiencing all kinds of pain and suffering alongside with the joys and all the inspirational things as well. Otherwise, if we just inundate ourselves with just what we think are the good things, all of a sudden they're not good anymore, right? It's like um it's like Picasso's painting of Guernica. Picasso has that beautiful painting Guernica, and it's
What
a
is that?
it's a landscape piece. Um it's
I don't know if I've ever
it
seen that.
Yeah, it's a black and white. It's landscape. It's very big, and it's he painted in response to the Spanish Revolution, I believe. And the whole thing is just it's painful to look at. Um, like there's a whole lot of pain. It's a very emotive piece, and there's a whole lot of pain in like certain animals depicted in it. And on the left side of the painting there's a mother who's weeping and looking up um and wailing over her dead child, right? um and it's just a very emotive piece. It's very painful, but it's through that experience of pain that we're given this beautiful piece of art, right?
Yeah,
um I don't know why I chose that one because there's so many examples as well, right? It's simple as a pietà, right? The same thing, right? Mary holding Christ, and the pain of that gives us this beautiful piece of art. You know, the the pain of the cross in general gives us the joy of the resurrection, right? And so and that's the whole concept behind not going into a metaverse, right? You need to have both experiences, or else a resurrection without a crucifixion is nothing. Stepping out of a tomb without having died first, anybody can do that. But you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah,
yeah,
the whole thing that you said about the pain bringing these beautiful experiences. It That's when I think of the hardest truths that human beings come to wrestle with, because not everybody gets it. Not everybody wants to, or at different times you get it, at different times you don't. I mean, I know in my own life, there's been moments of deep suffering that have brought about beautiful joys and beautiful resurrections, and yet there's also been times where there's been deep pains and sufferings that I've allowed to harden my heart. And I think that there's that choice within suffering, right? To I think go into it, to enter into it, to embrace it in a way, or to allow the whole mourning, right? Allow yourself to mourn, because then you will be comforted, because like on the other end of it is that resurrection, or is that beautiful moment, or is that painting or that poem. I mean, I mean, we're both more poets than we are probably anything else artistic, and um some of the most beautiful poetry comes out of these incredible experiences of pain. And I think the most beautiful poetry dances upon that line of possession and yearning, right? Like not possessing this beautiful thing or having lost it. But
That's love poetry,
oh
man.
I mean, I think it's all poetry, though. I mean, my favorite poetry, my
I think you
still,
see it. Yeah.
I mean, Francis Thompson. I just,
Yeah.
Oh man, but the poem that he has, oh gosh, my brain. It's like my favorite poem. I can't even remember right now. Not the Hound of Heaven, although I talk about that one way too often. No, I think it's Lily. I think it's called Lily, or oh gosh, no, Daisy. I think it's maybe Daisy. Oh man, you have to look it up. Anyways,
Okay.
I think it's out of the Daisies, but it's when he meets this little girl by the seaside, and they just sort of look at the seaside, and they just sort of share this moment together, standing by the seaside. And then she goes her way, and he has this beautiful line of, I don't want to not say it properly, but like all the pain or all the pangs of partings, and all the partings yet to be, or something like that. And I gotta pull up the poem. Okay, you talk for a second.
I
I'm
got
gonna
it.
pull up this. Oh, did you
I'm
find it?
cool.
Go to like
Yeah,
the
it's
end of it,
called
man.
Daisy.
Yeah, it's Daisy. Okay, so go to the end, and it's one of it's
I'll read
absolutely
the last 3 stanzas.
okay. Go ahead.
She left me marveling
Yeah.
why my soul was sad that she was glad, at all the sadness in the sweet, the sweetness in the sad. Still, still I seem to see her, still look up with soft replies, and take the berries with her hand, and the love with her lovely eyes. Nothing begins and nothing ends that is not paid with moan, for we are born in others' pains and perish in our own.
Yeah. I think it speaks to what we've been talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is nothing. Yeah, that is not paid with moan. Yeah,
And also, for we are born in others' pains and perish in our own. And then also the left in me the pangs of all the partings gone, and all the partings yet to be. I think
yeah,
that there's something to that, where like poetry dances on that. The most beautiful poems, they dance on that edge, sort of like a nice edge. But if you don't experience it yourself, you can never write a beautiful poem, or
yeah,
or you end up. And I think we have a lot of art today where it's lame. Like it doesn't, because it's not embracing that. It's one extreme or the other. It's all
yeah.
pleasure, or it's
I
all
think it's
pain.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, I feel like it's a common misconception that poetry takes you out of the real world and puts you in a world of pleasure, or puts you in a world of just love poetry, or just put you in a world of pain, or something like that. And if that were the case, then the metaverse is poetry, right? you know,
No, for sure.
if that were the case, then but that's not what poetry does. The poetry puts you, in a sense, more in the world. It's all it's all the possibilities of something that has been experienced, and it's looking at it from all the different perspectives of that. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
yeah, I do think though that I think that's where art, and the most beautiful art, touches again on that balance, that it's on that knife's edge, that it rides, or it teeters. But most of, I think, our art today is either all pleasure or it's all pain. Right? You have incredibly depressing things, and I remember. And look,
oh yeah,
I still to this day I think the movie's actually quite beautiful. Blue Valentine with people might
Ryan
think I'm, oh
Gosling.
man, yeah. Dude, I
I
think it's a good.
hate that movie. That's
Why?
a oh.
It's so painful, man. It's like horribly painful. But there's,
I did not like that movie.
I think at the end though, and look, I agree. Somebody at the very end, I watched it with my family once and with some friends, and I remember at the end everybody hated it
Watch that
except
with
for
your
me.
family? That's not the type of movie I would watch with my family.
It's just worse because I watched it with my mom, who like wants, like, her idea of a movie is a movie that is super happy. Everything is like, is a perfect ending, and nobody is sad at the end, and everything is happily ever after, and all the things are resolved and
Your
happily ever.
mom's a Midsummer's Night Dream
Oh
kind of
my,
girl.
yeah. And so I watched that with her, and she hated it. She could not believe that this was a
Well, I'm with your mom on this one. I did not like that movie.
it's I think but I think there's something really cool how they show like the beauty of the young love, and then they show it kind of fall apart. I just thought it was really reminiscent of like the relationships in our world today. I just thought it was
There
a
were
beautiful
yeah.
it
I mean,
was a
I did not like the movie. That being said, there is something kind of painfully true about it. If that's what you're getting at, that I can agree with.
I think that's more of what I liked about it, is that I thought it was painfully true, and there were some redeeming moments in it. There were definitely some redeeming moments. There were 100%. Come on, Tony.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. But I mean, it's painfully true. It's painfully true, and I think that's what people want. Like, it's like, oh, you see that with movies, right? You see that with music, right? Your favorite one of your favorite genres of music, being hip hop, one of my favorite genres of music being folk, right? It's something you see in both of them is the painfully true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You absolutely see that in like hip hop, talking about the grind
Real
and the
hip-hop.
hustle, real hip hop here, right? And you see folk music doing the same thing, it's mining songs and working songs and things like that,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean, they were born out of a lot.
it's
They were born out of a lot of pain, I think. They
yeah,
like
and it's these
the
songs that actually latch on and start defining a culture and society and a people that are painfully true. Yeah, they're painfully true,
But I think you've
right?
had the sorry.
And even things like and painfully true and to be fair, painfully true is also love songs as well. But my point is the painfully true, right? Um, yeah,
But I guess
you start to see the things that latch on are the painfully true.
I want to push into this a little bit.
Okay.
Which is that the whole dancing on the knife's edge, and then a lot of our art falling onto either the one side of all pleasure or all pain. Because I think when the art forms have arisen, right? So with rap, I'll take rap. Rap arose out of a lot of pain, right? When you think of Nas and you think of Jay-Z, or you go to NWA and all the guys at NWA, like there's a lot of pain there, right? It comes out of a life that was not pleasant, and their art was in many ways painfully true. But I mean, you listen to Nas's early album. I mean, man, they're beautiful. There's something about them that is just, he paints these pictures of life in New York City, and of even this kind of, in many ways, terrible life, but it's beautiful in a sense. I think it's quite beautiful, and yet
He portrays it so accurately.
he portrays it so accurately.
Yeah.
But also he sees something more in it. Like he sees something heroic in it. Like he paints these characters within it that are almost heroes and heroic, and there's something.
Yeah. Creates a narrative.
Yeah, and so. But then as time has gone on, and maybe it's like this with folk, where folk maybe like leaked back into your Kenny Chesney's country, and then now
Oh my
it's,
gosh!
no. Here, listen to me for a second though. Where you kind of have like true folk music with things like John Hartford and these beautiful these incredible musicians, and then it kind of
Mississippi John Hurt.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you kind of end up with like Kenny Chesney, but then you also have the redemption moment where you get the mandolin oranges now, and you get these other artists who are now kind of taking that art form and they're bringing it back to its roots in some sense. But like Kenny Chesney is all just pleasure. Like it's all just like, hey, I'm drinking I'm drinking in the rain, and then I fall in the mud and we make out in the mud, and then I'm drunk and we're just feeling real good, guys. Like everybody feel good. Like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
it's so lame. Like it's so lame. And then and then with rap, I think it's become the same thing. It's all just like all this like pleasure. It's all look at me, look at me, look at me, look how awesome I am, look how much pleasure I have in my life, look how much pleasure I'm able to obtain for myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's just lame. Like it's lame. Like there's there's nothing to it. And that dances on the one side of it. And then you have this music which is just like nihilistic and to the extreme, and you can think of things like, I mean, man, if you go back to like Breaking Benjamin and like bands of these rock bands and stuff, like
Hobson does that sometimes.
he does leak into that, yeah, for sure. And he kind of fights, you can tell that he kind of fights it, but he totally leaks into it, and even there's a lot of rappers that leak into that. But the point is that like you also have this other extreme, which is like pure pain. It's either pure pain or it's pure pleasure, but it's very the most beautiful art is the one that kind of rides on the knife's edge, where there's pain, but it's not pain without a purpose, but it's also there's the acceptance of the understanding or the hope that through this pain there might come a resurrection, that through this pain there might come comfort, that through this mourning there might come comfort, so I don't know, there's something.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think
simplistic and
oh yeah, I mean it's all
thing,
simplistic. Yeah, I mean we're your couch sitting philosophers over here, but I mean yeah, I think the hope, to bring it all around full circle to Bonfire Media. I mean, I guess the hope for Bonfire Media is to
ride the knife's edge.
Yeah, to ride the knife's edge, to use that metaphor. I mean, I think I've been thinking a lot about it recently, as I'm certainly, and we're certainly no Mark Zuckerbergs, but
no.
but to do that little bit you can to counteract the metaverse.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and
I think it's to create experiences for people that either push them to go outside and experience something real in their life, and to pursue and to actually try to pursue those same experiences or those same poetic moments in their own life, and to receive those things from the rain or from a sunset, and to also provide them for people, like to give them those experiences, because without them your soul's just dead. So I don't know.
And a lot of people, and I guess the thing is, in our own lives, me and you in particular, you and I have been blessed to like have these things in our life and been surrounded by things which point out these beautiful experiences to us, right? And the whole inspiration for creating Bonfire is to help be that for other people, right? To help point out beautiful things to other people, right? We're not the point isn't to sit here and explain it to you and to tell you why it's beautiful or anything like that. We're not experts on these things.
Yeah.
But the point is to create a place, starting online and hopefully getting more offline and just in your own communities, in your homes, where you can experience beauty and where you can surround yourself with the same things.
Yeah.
And where then you can go and take that and bless other people with beauty, right? And give hope, right?
Yeah. And I think to create, hopefully, again, I think hopefully and it goes back to something we talked about at the beginning, which is friendship, right? It's hopefully to awaken, and hopefully people discover friendship and love and true love, love of their brother or love of their sister, like through, within this world of beauty. And to touch on I think what you said, which is it's constantly with the trajectory of, hey, we're not sitting here telling you why this thing is beautiful. We're just putting this beautiful thing in front of you. Like, experience it, immerse yourself in it, then go and pursue something like that. If that inspires you to go pick up philosophy, go pick up philosophy. I don't
Yeah.
really care in some sense. Like
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
it's
and
more
the
of like,
interesting thing is too, like, I mean, we sit here and have this conversation, and the whole inspiration, for recording a podcast or recording music or putting down our own second-rate poems or something like that,
Yeah.
right? The whole part is, well, there's lots of inspirations. One of it is to show people it can be, people are doing this, right? And like, there are people out there having good conversations. Like, am I Aristotle and are you Aquinas? Are we experts
no.
at this? No, we're not.
No,
And
no.
many of the things that we're talking about, like, quite frankly, we could be massively wrong about.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We're not spreading this as the truth. What we are spreading, what we do want to say is that this is what the
It's worth at
pursuit of
least
the truth.
pursuing.
This is what the pursuit of the truth,
Yeah.
looks like. This is this is you we can all do this. We can all engage in conversations trying to uplift each other and trying to introduce each other to beautiful things and trying to understand why the things in our life are beautiful.
Thank you for listening to the Bonfire Podcast, Episode 1. We decided to cut it off. The last little bit was a little bit wandering, so we decided to cut it off. But thank you for listening, and we look forward to making more episodes, and we hope that you look forward to listening to them.